Welcome back. You're watching Sunday edition here on KTN News. Let's now take a look at what's making headlines in our local newspaper dailies. Of course, being today Sunday, let's take a look at the Standard on Sunday. And my guests are here with me, as I told you, Ishmael Nyaribo, lawyer, governance and strategy expert, Dr. Walter Ongeti, Jubilee strategist Brian Mbogwa, and Dismas Mukwa, political analyst. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, let's start with page 19 of the Standard on Sunday. Jubilee party dream was untimely, Uhuru and Ruto allies now admit. Let me start with you, Dismas. Do you think this headline is a bit pushing it, or is this happening?
That headline is accurate, and I suspect whoever in Jubilee came up with the strategy that they needed to merge the political parties and just discovered that they did one huge mistake. But I suspect the person who came up with the initiative was working on the brief of the deputy president. And the deputy president has made public his ambitions that he would want to use this year as a stepping stone to 2022 and 2027. So he was hoping to craft a system that would serve his selfish interest, and he didn't take into account of any other person's interest, not even his boss, President Kenyatta. If you look at the lineup of the party officials for Jubilee, you'll be surprised to learn that all of them are friends of Ruto. Mm-hmm. And the president has only got one friend there called Murathe. And it's not surprising that as we approach this election, there may be a coup within Jubilee. And I know Higgins is reluctant to accept that. However, with the entry of Gideon Moi, and I'm sure we are going to discuss that. Sorry, or Brian Mbogwa. Brian Mbogwa will be reluctant to accept that. But again, with the entry of Gideon Moi coming to complicate the equation, the deputy president, Ruto, being an abrasive man, very vindictive and power hungry, he may just decide to cause a coup. And you know, he's been accusing NASA that NASA or Jajipanga, they don't even know who their presidential candidate is. Now, with the entry of Moi in Jubilee, you have a potential of three candidates. You have a Gideon Moi, the deputy president, and the president himself. So it's going to be a very complicated ball game.
All right.
And part of the reason why folks in Jubilee have been crying, they know for a fact that the party primaries are not going to be free and fair. So they've created an opportunity for Governor Munya and his party PNU to attract membership. They're giving an opportunity to Martha Karua and NAC, and somebody that nobody expected to have an influence in central Kenya, Governor Mutua, with his Maendeleo Chap.
Right. Yeah. Brian, all these parties that Dismas is mentioning, Maendeleo Chap, PNU, NAC Kenya, all trying to hive off some slice of Jubilee due to the fact that Jubilee is a very big party and people are feeling a bit intimidated. Do you think that maybe Kenyans were not ready for such a big political party?
No, I think
that is Kiraitu Murungi's
those parties are
sentiments.
They are heaving up the second tier politicians, because serious politicians want to compete in the Jubilee primaries because Jubilee is a strong party. And what I can say is people don't understand why Jubilee was formed. Jubilee was formed to be a national party. You know, when you used to say TNA, you used to say it's a Mount Kenya party. When you used to say URP, you used to say it's a Rift Valley party. Now, at least you can say Mount Kenya and Rift Valley in one sentence when you define Jubilee. So it's a movement that's going to be a national party, as you can see.
Why, Daktari, why do you think the resistance is there, or is it just fear?
I think, Ben, this thing is coming from the fear of free and fair nominations. And of course also drawn from the fact that people would want to directly interact with the candidate, the elected or the electorate, instead of interacting at some point or being sieved at some nomination level. And I can tell you that if these smaller parties were not going to come or form, then there was going to be a lot of challenges, in fact security challenges,
right,
and people eliminating each other at that political nomination level. So it is a very good thing that we are seeing now some splinter parties, smaller parties. They're actually creating some sort of vent for right, Jubilee, so that instead of a party having 23 in some county assembly, some wards, you have some parliamentary aspirants, up to 40 in some constituencies. It is better for Jubilee to have Maendeleo Chap, to have PNU, to have all these parties to create some vent. And of course, I agree totally with Kiraitu Murungi that despite the fact that the idea may have been good, Kenyans were not ready for this sort of single party, or they have a fear that Jubilee was going to take them back to where KANU had been at that particular point, and it was going to be a party that settles scores. So it is a very welcome idea that there are these smaller parties which are supporting Jubilee or the presidential candidature, and they are going to field their own candidates at the lower level.
Ishmael, what do you think about this and the timing?
Thank you, Ben, for hosting us. I think, in my view, what comes out is clearly the inexperience in those parties that actually merged.
Right.
You see, this is Kareto Murungi talking, and there was also some disquiet within the Ruto camp recently. You heard Murkomen complaining that they are not getting a fair deal. So I think this shows inexperience on the part of the parties that merged, and you will see what the other parties are doing, like in NASA and CORD as it was. They are not necessarily breaking the parties, but they are joining together to form a coalition. So this was a misstep, and I think they will live to regret every time of their life. Yes.
As both sides of the political divide, as you make your point, Dismas, as both sides of the political divide prepare for the elections, which strategy is going to work better? Amalgamation of 11 political parties into one, or super alliance?
Well, there are two scenarios to look at. First of all, when you look at Jubilee today, Jubilee, you wouldn't say that it's a coalition of political parties or institutions. It's been a coalition of two individuals, and now Gideon Moi is upsetting the entire scenario, is becoming the third individual. And whatever is going to happen in Jubilee is going to be informed by individual decisions. Whatever Ruto decides, whatever Kenyatta decides, and now Gideon Moi will carry their way. Unlike NASA, which is claiming that it's a coalition of institutions that are bringing together political parties. And that poses a very serious challenge, because if they don't manage it very well, in places like Nairobi, Mr. Mbogo and company would easily take over the governor's position if say Musalia Mudavadi decides to get a lawyer man to run for NC and Raila Odinga gets, say, Kidero, then they would easily lose. But the interesting thing within Jubilee, that the deputy president has never been nervous at the mention of PNU and Muya. Is kept very quiet. And at the mention of Maendeleo Chap is not raised the issues, and even NAK Kenya. The only time he's becoming a bit nervous, and when you look at his body language the last couple of days, he's very nervous at the mention of Gideon Moi. So one wonders what makes him nervous. Is it because of the Rift Valley dynamics, or maybe the visit of Mama Ngina Kenyatta to Kabarak to have a word with Daniel Arap Moi is bringing a bit of friction. And those are, I think, the issues, the dynamics which are really going to affect the DP route, especially when they're doing their nominations in Rift Valley.
All right.
Because now for the first time in a long while, the people in Rift Valley have been, actually, they're going to be spoiled for choice. People in the Northern Rift are going to find that they've got company of KANU. So anybody who is saying that is supporting the President Kenyatta can either use Jubilee or can use KANU. And then in the South Rift, now they've got Chama Shinani, and then also they have KANU. So I think Mr. Mbugwe is in a bit of trouble to try and establish how they're going to manage Chama Shinani.
We're going to talk
KANU.
about that KANU equation, but Brian, this must be a very strong indictment of your party that it has no structures.
I think that's a lie. I don't remember when Dima was the
It's only
spokesperson.
decisions of two people that really matter. Is that true?
You know, this must come from a school of thought that a party is made of individuals. But you see, Jubilee has members. And we had a delegate conference, and the delegates allowed us to merge these parties. And as much as this must want us to believe that Jubilee is a party of two individuals and a third one has come in, I don't think that's a main issue here, because before there was Maendeleo Chap, there was PNU, there was NAK Kenya supporting Jubilee. So there's nothing special like KANU in that equation. It's the same as PNU, Mashinani and other parties.
All right. Was it a mistake to fold small parties? Is this something that has been said by some of those people who feel disgruntled, who folded up their parties, the likes of Kalembe, Ndile, and all those small parties? Was it a mistake for those parties to fold up?
Ben, as we spoke here some times back, I shared and said that, you know, globally, trade is being localized as much as it is becoming global. If, for instance, you want to go to an amusement park, different countries are creating amusement parks that have local content in them. In fact, if you look at even now the bill that we are having in terms of the energy bill, revenue sharing for mineral resources, there is a component of local content. And so today it would have been better for a party like New Ford Kenya to fight off Ford Kenya in a place like Bungoma. That creates that local content, and people are able to relate to New Ford Kenya. They know where they can find the chairman, just maybe around the corner. They know who the Secretary General is, and so it would have been easier. And in marketing, you would call that a fighter brand for the national party and national movement. It would have been easier for Tip Tip, for example, to field MCAs at the very local level and then have now their support for the national candidature. So in my view, at that particular time, Jubilee may have thought they are creating a movement, maybe together with the law, try to lock in candidates inside Jubilee, but that has not worked very well. But allow me to comment on something that Dismas is bringing up in terms of the position of Gideon Moi as he comes into Jubilee, or to support President Kenyatta.
Support Mr. Kenyatta.
To support Mr. Kenyatta. You see, I do not think that Mr. Kenyatta would be looking for Gideon Moi as an alternate to William Ruto. And if that would be the strategy, then it will be the worst strategy that the Kenyatta side may be thinking through. Because, you know, Gideon Moi still remains a baby in terms of politics, and is going to grow over time compared to William Ruto, because he has had his politics revolve around West Pokot and revolve around Baringo, and he's not been able to reach out. So he will grow through. It will take time perhaps, and it may come in 2022 or thereabout, but as of now, it will, if what Dismas is talking about is anything to go by, then it will be the tragedy of the Kenyatta side.
And I think we're going to have a very good conversation when we get to that topic. Yes,
Just before you really move forward, you see, mergers are important and they are good. In fact, if you look at countries like Bulgaria, Canada, Georgia, what has happened, you know, good coalitions can even form a geographical bloc that can actually make a country. What is the reason why NASA is forming a coalition, and why is Jubilee breaking all parties so that they call themselves one party and now call on KANU, and then they stand together? If you look at the statement just after inaugurating NASA, you know, as a coalition, you could see that the mistake our NASA did is they attacked Jubilee almost immediately. They are attacking 7 million people who probably are not their enemies. And when you look at Jubilee, when they're coming out here to make an announcement, they are actually attacking NASA supporters who are innocent. So this is where I find the problem. People can form coalitions. Yes. You can support whichever candidate or whichever group you want. But the problem comes in when you start the infighting and you direct your anger to innocent supporters behind Uhuru Kenyatta or behind Moses Wetangula.
All right.
I'm careful and choosy to my.
I noticed. Let's move to page 5 of the Standard on Sunday. Staying with Jubilee still, battle for Nairobi seats threatens to rip Jubilee right in the middle. This is a kind of a different battle that your party is facing, Brian. The two camps, the former Gatanga MP, Peter Kenneth, and the one calling themselves Team Nairobi with Gideon Mbuvi, Sonko, Johnson Sakaja, Dennis Waweru, and Bishop Margaret Wanjiru. Dismas, what gives here? I mean, are we seeing another scenario like 2013 where the TNA side failed to agree and they ended up splitting the votes and Kidero akapita katikati?
Among all the persons who want to be governor for Nairobi from Jubilee, none has got political capital of their own. All of them, they're just dancing in the sky. They don't have political capital. The people are going to decide who's going to be...
Even Sonko?
Sonko doesn't have political capital because Sonko got 200,000 votes more than President Kenyatta, but he did not transfer his votes to President Kenyatta. So it's very easy for President Kenyatta to ask him to take a walk. So all those candidates are going to run on Mr. Kenyatta's political capital as well as Ruto. Whoever Kenyatta and Ruto decide to be governor for Nairobi on a Jubilee ticket, that's going to be the candidate. And already a decision has been taken that it's going to be Peter Ken. So for the rest of the so-called Team Nairobi, I think they're just trying to condition themselves to accept reality. Because the president and his deputy have sat down over a cup of coffee and have said, Peter Ken is going to be our candidate for governor. Millie Omanga is going to be our candidate for women rep. And Sonko has been told that if he's not careful, he may even lose the position for the Senate. And there's no way Sonko would ever imagine that he has more political capital than President Kenyatta in Nairobi. That will be a very wild dream. So at the end of the day, and you can confirm that the Jubilee Party has indicated in their instruments of power that for them to elect a candidate is through nomination or consensus. And for consensus, it's not indicated in black and white. And Ishmael is a lawyer. It's not very elaborate that this is what must happen. Provided the president and his deputy have agreed it's Peter Ken, the rest have to dance along. And if, say, Sonko or Sakaja or Oyuru imagine that they're going to stage a coup and walk out with supporters, they don't have supporters. For instance, do you imagine that Waweru can tell the Kikuyu community in Nairobi that don't vote for Peter Ken because I've taken issues with the president? That will not work. And remember, when you become president, you've got a lot of powers. And all these candidates have got issues around corruption hanging on their necks. Others even have got pending cases in court. I'll not be surprised if Sonko tries to kick trouble. He finds Keriako Tobiko landing on him shortly before the elections, and he'll find himself spending a lot of time at either Milimani commercial courts or the criminal courts.
What about all this honesty we see in the face of the president and William Ruto saying we are not going to support any candidate? I don't know how he gets this
Ishmael, if you ever believe what politicians say in Kenya, then Kenya would be in the level of Singapore. You remember the manifesto? Do you remember the kind of trains they promised us? What you read in the manifesto? So if they were to keep their word, then Kenya would be a first one.
You know, Brian, is what Dismas saying, is that the official lineup?
I don't know what Dimas smokes in the morning, but what I can say is this.
It's a good product.
Whatever you are seeing is normal competition. And that can tell you which party is popular in Nairobi if people are fighting fiercely for that ticket. And it's normal in any competition that people will throw tantrums, people will say 1, 2, 3 things. But as the president has said and the deputy president, Jubilee Party primaries will be free and fair. And what Dismas has said about how we select our candidates, every party right now has submitted their nomination rules to IEBC. And anyone can go and check what's in there. So for Nairobi, it's purely competition.
Right, you say it's healthy competition, but the Nairobi senator and Bishop Margaret Wanjiru have said if they are not happy with the primaries, they will walk out. And if they're not, they sense that things are not going to be free and fair, they will walk out and vie for government.
You know,
is that going to split the party?
In politics, people say all sorts of things. Like, how do you define free and fair? Because if you lose squarely and you say it was not free and fair, you just interest yourself by saying it's not free and fair. What you are seeing there, it's fear for competition. It was a walkthrough to all of them. Then the entrance of Peter Kenneth brought them together to try and fight him back as an outsider. But you can see the good bishop herself came from ODM the other day. Mike Sonko was in Kenya the other day. So these are just competition, purely competition. Whatever they are saying is to hive off the competition.
Doctor, do you agree with what Dismas is saying, that the president and the deputy have already agreed on this? Remember, Peter Kenneth has been touted as a potential heir to the throne in terms of 2022 politics. Would Ruto be agreeable to that?
I don't know if they have agreed on the candidate, but I would agree with Dismas that for Nairobi it will be guided democracy. You will not have a scenario where you subject these people or the candidates into a nomination exercise. The reason being that if you subject a county like Nairobi to a nomination exercise, even with the smart card, you face the danger of infiltration by the NASA side, and you'll likely see NASA having a hand into who becomes the candidate of Nairobi. And that is actually what happened in 2013 to land on a candidate like Waititu at that particular time, that Kidero had some hand, in my view, into that candidate. And so it is likely. I don't know if they have agreed, because you remember last Sunday, Waweru found some space to be next to the deputy president. And of course, as you're saying, some 2022 thinking maybe, especially in the deputy president's quarters, as to the role or the positioning of Peter Kenneth. But there's also another group that may have had an influence or will have a lot of influence when it comes to the candidate who will be the Jubilee's candidate in Nairobi. And that is the Mount Kenya Forum, or I don't know what the name they call themselves.
Mount Kenya Mafia.
No, not Mafia. But there is a lot of interest in terms of business interest that this forum has had in terms of Nairobi, and they have had an interest in ensuring that the candidate who becomes the Nairobi governor is one whom they feel can actually secure
Daktari, a lot of people seem to think that Mount Kenya group have a lot of influence.
Correct. And that influence is going to manifest itself when the candidate is selected. It is not likely to be a selection exercise where you allow the masses to have an influence in that particular nomination exercise. That influence is going to be informed by largely business interests, and those business interests are those that are largely going to skew towards the Murang'a side, and that is where Peter Kenneth may likely come on board. But of course, that having been said, it is important to note that Jubilee is seeking support from other quarters on the national front. And so Jubilee will be asking itself, if we are going to have a candidate who is from Mount Kenya, who is the Nairobi governor, and we also have a presidential candidate who is from the Mount Kenya region, how do we pitch in the other fronts, in the other places, in the other countrywide? And that should be able to play out very well when they are selecting the candidate as well.
Ishmael,
Ben, now you say, now you see, these mythologies are actually our biggest problem in the country. This is Nairobi. It's as good as a sub-country, quote unquote. This is a metropolitan city with a lot of educated people, the cream of society being here. They still believe that somebody somewhere is practicing some magic behind very intelligent citizens in Nairobi. I don't believe this. What I know is there, and this is politics. You don't expect to go into elections like you're walking into a mosque or a church for somebody to tell you without questioning. There will be, of course, like somebody said, it's politics. The head of state has an interest to see that his party wins in Nairobi. The same thing NASA has. But I don't think there's this deep, magical movement of, backroom way of trying to maneuver so that Peter Kenneth becomes the sole candidate. No. Remember, and I said this before, the governors, elsewhere, the governors in all these counties want to win. There is no way they're going to concentrate on what happens in Nairobi so that they lose in their Kirinyaga or Nyamira or in Mombasa. So I think this is pure politics.
The gentlemen seem to be looking at you like you're from Mars.
Ben, allow me to say something.
All right, then I come to Dr.
It would be naive for Ishmael to imagine that politics is run according to studies in political science, that you place everything on the table and you ask voters to come on board. Majority of the voters in Kenya are irrational. When Raila Odinga tells the people to go and vote for NASA, Raila did not have a consultative forum with all ODM supporters countrywide to tell them, we are now going to NASA, or Musalia Mudavadi, or Kalonzo, or Wetangula. Those three gentlemen met for a cup of tea, and they said, we are forming NASA. And everybody else, right now, if you get somebody from Lunyanza, they'll be defending NASA to the high heavens. They'll be saying, this is the way to go. The same is happening for Jubilee in Nairobi. Jubilee in Nairobi does not exist in the absence of President Kenyatta and the deputy. So their supporters in Nairobi, right now they're seated having tea and mandazis, waiting for instructions. And it's all about what Walter calls guided democracy. If you're just thinking that the Jubilee Nairobi will wake up one day in the morning, go and cast their ballots, and Mr. Mbogo will tell you there's a lot of mobilization. Voters have been brought from as far as Kisii to Nairobi to come and vote for a particular person.
Just so that he doesn't make a wrong statement, look at Kisii, for example. You call it a battleground with very hard heads. Sorry, I'm not accusing anybody, but strong or very well-positioned heads. Here, Raila comes and tells Kisii, I want votes. There's no stone throwing. Here, the head of state comes in and says, I want votes. There's no stone throwing. I expect Nairobi to be so balanced with very well-educated men and women who run the economy of this country, to be told by the head of state that I humbly suggest that you vote in Peter Kenneth. And Raila will come in and say, no, I suggest that you vote in Honorable Kidero. But that should not result into these assumptions that it is already cast in stone that it is Peter Kenneth, and if you don't vote him in, then we are not going to support him.
That's first one politics.
Plus, Ben, in reality, you know, if you are 5 candidates going to a competition, you are sure 4 will lose and 1 will gain. So I'm sure some of them are coming to that realization, and they're trying to get out of the race.
Unfortunately, Ben, Ishmael seems not to have looked at the numbers very well. The numbers of the people whom we are talking about, level-headed, the professionals and so forth, those Facebook voters, will not queue to go and vote. The people who will vote are the people who are in Kibera, the people who are in Mathare North, the people who are in those Kariobangi and Huruma and so forth, people who are waiting to be given direct instructions as to who will become the candidate, no matter. Like, look at how Kidero has performed in Nairobi. The person who pitched in 2013 as somebody who is going to transform Nairobi into a middle-income, state-of-the-art city, has he performed? No, he has not performed. But let me tell you and assure you, and those kind of people, a few weeks ago, I sat with top executives of blue chip companies here, and I asked them, do you think is going to become, whom are you going to vote for? And I can tell you those guys, because they're inclined to NASA, they were very categorical. We are going to vote for Kidero. Why? Because the NASA has said it is likely to be Kidero. So this thing, in terms of voting, does not expect rationality at any particular point.
Let's continue this conversation, focusing on another part of the country. This page 4 of the Standard on Sunday. The day Ruto betrayed me and Jirongo. This is the now Deputy Party Leader of the Amani National Congress, Kipruto Kirwa, narrating the intrigues that from the YK92 days to his fallout with the Deputy President, William Ruto. They were very close allies at some point. Dismas, he seems to still have the fire in him. He's been in the political cold for 10 years. What does he bring to the NASA table? Does he challenge some constituency from Nandi? That is, of course, Ruto's tough.
Well, I think when you're looking at Kipruto Rapkiro, you need to go back to history. As one of the most liberal and independent-minded MPs during the time of President Moi, he was among the few MPs who would actually speak up their mind without fear of being arrested or even getting into a beating. And then during 2002, he joined NACA and he became a Minister for Agriculture. Right. And he's remembered as having coming up with policies to ensure that Kenya achieves some elements of food security. Something that Jubilee has done with a lot of success to dismantle those policies. Now Kenya is food insecure. But when he joins NASA, that's now the face of the Nandi community. I think that's the reason why NASA would want to have him on board. And I watched yesterday when you were covering him in Eldoret. The reason why he came to speak more is to appeal to the Kalenjin community, to tell them that in as much as Deputy President Ruto is in Jubilee, if you don't vote for Jubilee, you still have one of your own within NASA. And I think that's the same thing NASA is trying to do with the Mashinani chief, Governor Isaac Ruto, to tell him to come on board and join the summit, so that for the members of the Kalenjin nation, who for some reason believe that being in government, you must see your leaders running around with GK vehicles, they can see those faces in government and it gives them some level of comfort. And of course, Kirwa is an experienced politician, he knows how to negotiate. So it's not a surprise that Musalia Mudavadi appointed him to that committee of 12, because he's gone through all those negotiations and he understands it very well. Right. And that's somebody that William Ruto would have been very happy to have on board. But again, because of the bad blood and betrayal, he couldn't have him on board. But again, one begins to wonder, why should Kirwa be lamenting about being betrayed? Because betrayal is the order of the day in the political space. People are pursuing their selfish interest, and at some stage, if you have divergent views, then you betray each other, you backstab each other, you step on each other's toes, and hope that in future you'll meet and celebrate a new beginning.
What's your analysis of Kipruto Kirwa?
I think just like his party leader, there are people who wish to be given, like, you run, we'll support you. You see, the other day Ruto said that siasa ni kujipanga. You just set your path and you walk through. What I can say to Kipruto Rapkirwa is there was some before him. In ODM, we had several ministers, like their former chairman, Henry Kosgei, Dr. Sally Kosgei, Magerer, Musa Silma. They were there supporting ODM in the last election, but they didn't bring in any votes. Same to Kirwa. In fact, he has been in the cold for 10 years. You just can't come and start commanding a a following when you were called for 10 years. You need to build it pebble by pebble before you can reach to a certain level. So I think he's negotiating for himself, not for his people. On the other hand, like what Dismas has said about Mashinani, right now Mashinani party is an orphan in Rift Valley because they were moving under the armpit of Jogo Kanu. And now Kanu has seen the light and has supported President Uhuru Kenyatta for re-election. Mark you, what I can tell you, if you want to know if somebody is popular, go against the grain. If Kanu could have gone to NASA, it would be their death. Same to Mashinani. That's why you cannot see them in a NASA rally anymore.
Right. Interesting.
You hear now what Mbugua is saying, that if Kanu would have gone where? To NASA, they would have lost, because in Rift Valley there is only one kingpin, and that is William Ruto at this particular time. But back to this story, I read it and I have not seen that betrayal coming out very well, because at some point it is argued that when they were in UDM forming together, Jirongo, William and himself and others, that Jirongo came back and told them that him is exiting and is going to Kanu. But for William, he just exited. So, I mean, does that surmount into some serious betrayal? I mean, that is what happens. He himself was the other day in Newford, Kenya, when President appointed Eugene Wamalwa to become a cabinet secretary. He was to be deputy party leader. I wonder if he consulted or asked anybody before he left and now joined NASA. So in politics, as Dismas is saying, I think it is a matter of give and take, and I mean sometimes people abandon each other without any written documents, and Wakili will even tell you these MOUs they are signing are not even enforceable in a court of law. So the other day we had the CORD MOU. It was just thwarted like that, and there is now a NASA MOU. So I think in politics, that kind of heading does not fit the true betrayal, as it were.
All right.
I think those MOUs are enforceable, not necessarily in a court of law, but to allow comfort within the political, partnerships that people have. And I can always run and show another opponent of yours, you see what he agreed to do, but he has now refused. So that's how those MOUs work. But if you want to interpret them strictly in the court of law, of course, that is just no. What I wanted to mention about this Kirwa, I think, again, it shows inexperience in a lot of politicians in our country. And by the way, when I say inexperience, I'm looking at Moi, I'm looking at Raila Odinga, Jaramogi Oginga Odinga, Kenyatta, President, Mzee Kenyatta, and those other big political bigwigs in this country. You cannot cry after 10 years. In fact, you don't need to cry. Simply welcome back to Amani.
20, because it's 1999.
Come back and enjoy what you find. And thank you for going in to join some coalition which might make your name appear in the map. So there's no need to cry.
Finally, page 2, church leaders call for credible polls and peace campaign. Where do you think, let me start with Mr. Akili, where do you think the church stands as we go to the election?
Yeah, I saw the head of state has made a request for all religious groups to pray. I think you saw on the 10th, 11th, and 12th. Muslims on 10th, those who worship on Saturday, the Adventists and others on 10th, on 11th, and then the Sunday faithfuls on 12th. I think, in principle, that is very good. I mean, you're trying to acknowledge the sovereignty of higher deity, who is our God. But I think in terms of national security and how you will protect us as a head of state on the 8th of August this year, I will not mention prayer. And I hope I will not be misunderstood by religious people or by Christians or Muslims. Prayer is critical. But have you seen that the police people, the security standing around the president cannot close their eyes to pray when we are all praying as a nation? Why? That is the way it is. So I think the country should gear forward, preparing in terms of security and preparing in terms of those logistics by IABC and all other institutions to have it right.
Then pray.
Never wait that things go wrong and then pray. I really do not.
But Dr. Ari, does the church have a position? part to play.
Correct, and that position is both the spiritual and deliberateness in terms of planning. Both as a very staunch Christian and as a strategist, we say that you can pray for success, you can plan for success, but you can also pray and plan for success at the same time. And in this particular case, prayer is important, but also deliberate planning, as Wakili is putting it, is very, very important. And this is not just for the security apparatus and the head of state. Even the religious institutions should come in at this particular time handy in terms of creating mediation, like now when the issues we are having in Baringo are issues that the clergy would have come in very, very strongly to intervene and mediate, and many other things that are going to take place. There are going to be some chaos if nominations and the heat we are starting to see, and even opponents starting to hurt each other. It is the role of the religious community to come in very, very strongly to intervene both in prayer and also deliberateness in intervention measures.
Brian, Ishmael says that the president needs to do more than just say Kenyans need to pray for peace.
No, I think what the president said, he meant, a church has a platform, and the clergy meet with their congregation weekly, and you find a politician always wanting to go to church just to pass their message. So what the president is saying is there are millions of followers of religious groups, and they get spiritual nourishment every week from their clergy. And the president is telling the clergy, preach peace to those people. In fact, it's the work of everybody, including political leaders, to restrain their supporters from engaging in act of violence. So the president is perfectly in order to request the religious group to help in spreading the message of peace.
What do you think about the church?
Ben, when you talk about prayer, you immediately introduce hope that the good Lord is going to respond to our prayers in a particular manner. And Walter here will tell you that hope is not a strategy. It never works anywhere. If you have not gone to your farm to till, you cannot go to bed in the evening and hope that the following day in the morning there'll be corn on your piece of land. It will never happen. But when you look at the message the Catholic Church passed yesterday, and I think they need a pat on the back, is when they're calling for credible election. All along the church in Kenya, especially prosperity churches, have been calling for peaceful election. And peaceful election is a byproduct of a credible election. So the main issue here is whether or not IBC today, as we have this conversation, can guarantee that we are going to have a credible election. Right. And a credible election is a result of predictable systems. And IBC, as we see today, has not told Kenyans whether we have predictable systems for unpredictable outcomes. Because from insiders and people who know IBC is working, understand they don't even have the software. The new commissioners do not even understand what's going on. Understand there's a lot of friction going on at the commission. And that's what President Kenyatta is supposed to zoom in. In as much as we are told that IBC is an independent organization, the buck stops with President Kenyatta. He's supposed to be one of the people, as well as the NASA principals and his two other principals in Jubilee, to make sure that we have a credible poll. Because when folks in Kibera, if for some reason they are told the elections were not free and fair, they'll start uprooting the railway lines, and the prayer will not work.
All right. So we leave it on the political pages this morning. Many thanks for staying with us here on Sunday edition on KTN News. When we return, we talk some politics. We speak about the National Super Alliance, who were at the 64 Stadium in Eldoret in the county of Uasin Gishu yesterday. Their first joint political rally after putting pen to paper on that agreement with the 7-point agenda. We analyze that. Does the MOU hold any water? What about the fact that they don't have a formula for nominating the presidential candidate? We'll also talk about the issue of KANU supporting the re-election of President Uhuru Kenyatta. That's next here on Sunday Edition.